Mary. Welcome to our interview about nutrition and emotions. How are you?
Lovely to be here. Thanks, Angela.
Good. Okay, I'm very happy to see you today because nutrition is such an important aspect of life, obviously, but we totally forget about it and we rarely think about it when it comes to emotions. And you are exceptionally qualified to talk about this because I'm going to give people a little rundown on what your background is because it is really amazing. Mm-hmm. So you're a nutritional therapist and you're working in Brisbane. You have a BSc and a PhD in chemistry from the University of Leeds in the UK. And your first career was in market research of food and drink, where you worked with some of the biggest brands and helped them make their foods tasty and addictive as possible. Now, that sounds really interesting. I mean, you had a total flip. What caused that?
It was probably that I was just finding it slightly soul destroying in some ways. It was a fantastic time to really appreciate the money, the time, the experts, the amazing brains that go behind creating the foodstuffs that are in our supermarkets and what people, reach for. And one of the other key things, so I used to work in the working on linking the professional judgment of food, the sensory profiling of the food, to then what the consumer was saying about it. So we would do both sides. And so like a consumer would say, yes, I like that one the best. So you'd have different sort of formulations of a food, but they wouldn't always be able to say to the scientists, well, it's because of this, that, or the other. I just like it. And so we then did the research where we actually got a team of professional tasters to mark the different foods by all sorts of attributes. And then the statisticians in the company would link the two together and then give the food companies the real report about, well, if you change this mouthfeel, if you adjust that smell, if you change this taste, you'll make it even more attractive and addictive and make people want to eat more.
Wow.
And one of these biggest things that the insight this has given to me to my work now is that a lot of people think they should be in control of what they're eating. They put a lot of pressure on themselves, or they will do a lot of negative self-talk saying, oh, I just can't, I'm hopeless. I can't stop. You've got a lot of people that are making you feel like that behind the scenes, making this mouthfeel, making the crunch just right, making the smell just right. So that's probably the biggest thing that I do. Well, one of the things I bring into my practice is this real understanding and putting people into that space of, it's not your fault all the time. Yes, we are in control of our destinies, but you have to be given the tools. And a lot of people think they should just be able to do this all by themselves. And it's kind of, you don't know how much you are being manipulated just by the food manufacturers.
Well, I've heard that 90% of the foods that we find in supermarkets today didn't exist 100 years ago. And because they are so far removed from nature, they have absolutely nothing to do with food anymore. So what makes...
I mean, that's a really good point, because I actually really feel that we need a different word for food that's real food, or we need to change the wording for the food stuffs. Like I use the word food stuffs because, or the other word I use sometimes with clients is stomach fillers. Because actually a lot of the things that we can eat, they're not giving us any actual nutrients or nutrition per se, but they're getting rid of that hunger. They're kind of filling our stomach. They're making it kind of taste and a fairly nice experience while it's being, in your mouth and you're swallowing it and you're sort of enjoying that moment. But the real thing that makes nutrition, in my opinion, is something that then not only nourishes you in your sort of soul and enjoyment while you're eating it, but then over the coming hours, minutes, hours, days, weeks, months, is also nourishing your body and building you up. And supporting you. And that's kind of what food should be.
Yeah. You said when we talked earlier that you have one of your mentors is Deanne Minich. I don't know if I pronounce her correctly.
Yeah. Well, I've followed her for quite a long time, and I think she has a really beautiful approach to nutrition, and it's an incredibly holistic approach, which is one of the things that I think is so important, because there's so many different things actually going through my head where I could take this conversation, because there's too much about just seeing food, to be honest, as that quick, got to get it down. Oh, I'm just hungry, don't care what I eat. This is the lowest priority of my day. Don't really care what I eat. Anything will do, kind of thing.
And well, she talked about the rainbow diet. You know, it's like how many colors we put into our body. You know, it's like I love going to the markets and picking orange and red and green and yellow and coming home with I take one of those really big IKEA bags with me and I fill that up. And people look at me and say, how do you eat all of that? And I go, it's easy. I eat this every day. And it goes quickly. These foods that have nothing to do with food anymore. I mean, like the fillers, as you call them, they are basically the 3 food groups: fat, sugar, and salt, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the colors is an incredibly powerful thing. And as human beings, we are attracted to color, and we have always been attracted to those colorful foods, the fruits, the vegetables. This has been a really powerful thing in our whole evolution. And just coming back a little bit to what we talked about with the foodstuffs and the manufacturers, the food manufacturers, one of the other areas I used to do some projects in was also, or it was more the company would do projects in, was food packaging. Because actually that is where food manufacturers get the color in. They get the color in the outside. So people, like kids especially, or we're just attracted to that colorful packaging. And yet inside it's brown, lifeless food. But they don't want to show us the brown, lifeless food. They want us to see the packaging, because that's, you know, we are attracted to color. So if we could take away all of that packaging, more people would be naturally drawn to the beautiful berries and the rainbow diet. But we kind of don't even give ourselves that opportunity sometimes.
And then, of course, there are all these names, you know, orchard this and bounty this and farmer that, which have absolutely nothing to do what's inside. If you read, I mean, I look at ingredients lists, and if there's more than 3 ingredients, it's probably not food anymore. It's just what you call the stomach filler, or, you know, but it has nothing to do with nature. If we learn to eat foods that are not really food and that have not really much nutritional value, because there are so many fillers and so many artificial flavor enhancers and, you know, colors and, you know, preservatives and all of that in it. I mean, what does that do to us? I mean, it's like, this is the topic we're here about. How does food impact on our emotions? I mean, forget for the moment how it impacts on our bodies. Given that, of course, what we eat, we become, but how does it impact on our emotions when we put all of these things into our bodies?
I think it's important to potentially see where our emotions are actually coming from. So it's not just sort of an external thing. It's not just what's happening outside. We actually do have to have the right neurotransmitters, the right receptors for these emotions to even be fired, you know, so for our brains to even feel that sort of calmness. We've got to have the right neurotransmitters. We've got to have the right excitatory neurotransmitters too. And those are all produced in the body. And the only thing that produces them is actually what comes from our food and nutrients. So it's one of those things that until you actually really get the nutrition right, sometimes you're always going to be running around in circles trying to get those right emotions happening in many ways. If you start off getting the food right so that you have the right level of protein is incredibly important. Protein is like the backbone of a neurotransmitter. And then you need certain nutrients to come into play that allow the various, the right ones to be formed in the right way. So there is, you know, even just talking to somebody and hearing what they're going through on a day-to-day basis, I can start to also see the holes in the nutrition where we need a bit more magnesium or B vitamins or iron or just that protein backbone. We have a very the protein is one of the things that a lot of people sort of talk about a lot, you know, protein shakes and all the rest of it, and we're eating too much protein or too little, blah blah blah. But actually it's the right protein for that individual as well that plays a massive role, because you've got to be able to break it down properly. There's no point in being able to, you know, take all of this beautiful food in if your body isn't also breaking it down in the right way, digesting and absorbing all the nutrients too. There's an awful lot to it that people don't kind of appreciate, that they think, oh, everyone just eat the same. Oh no, if you just eat a balanced diet, that's all you need to do. And I'm like, actually, the more you learn, the more you're like, okay, well, this could be stopping it. This won't be absorbing properly. What about your enzymes? What about your stomach acid? If you're not, you know, if you've got too many toxins, if that's blocking that, and this isn't, there's so much that could be interfering. And this is where, you know, when you actually properly address all these things in a very nice step-by-step fashion, you can get some really lovely results and really change emotions and enhance everything beautifully.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is that our individual makeup is absolutely crucial. Do our genes also play a role in that? Because I know that, you know, I mean, we're both from Europe.
Yes.
I'm from the continent. You're not. You're from the island. So, I mean, I know that, for example, I mean, I grew up eating a lot of potatoes. And I know there are people who can't process potatoes at all, whereas I find it really easy to process them. But, you know, maybe I'm just kidding myself, you know, but again, there are certain foods that I think that, you know, that we can, in certain cultural environments where we grew up with certain foods, we can probably process better than in others where we didn't have those foods. And these days we eat food from all over the world that we may not even be used to and may not be able to process.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's so much more research being done now, coming out all the time about how which genes are influencing our ability to have susceptibility to certain diseases or conditions, or just the best way, you know, the best types of food. I think one of the key things that is the amount of carbohydrates that are now in the diet that are impacting probably so many people more than ever before. And the number of enzymes that we have for breaking down carbs is a lot less than we have for breaking down proteins. And that could be playing a key role in people's, you know, genetic ability to cope with those carbohydrates. So again, the makeup of our day-to-day food has changed so massively from when we were evolution wise, and being able to understand or help somebody point them into that personalized nutrition approach is where the real changes can happen, because the closer you go back to what your body can really break down, absorb and use, the healthier your body's going to become.
Yeah. Well, this takes us straight to the next question, is the connection between the biome and the brain, right? Because when we eat foods that we can't process, and from what I understand is when we're really driven by adrenaline and really stressed out and we eat food, we may as well eat cardboard because our digestive system shuts down. And, you know, and then we put some lovely antibiotics and some, you know, sugars and all sorts of stuff in there that our gut can't process, which is where we produce 95% of our serotonin. Our calmness and our contentment. So we don't nourish the gut.
I think so. The gut brain axis, there's the superhighway basically between the gut and the brain is absolutely, completely, fully, it's definitely there. And one of the things that we often say is, you know, do mental health issues or emotional issues happen first, or is it that the digestion starts to play up first? It's that whole chicken and an egg situation in some ways. So one of the things is also identifying that for some people. But the microbiome is influenced within hours by what you have eaten, or even minutes, as I believe some researchers have even said. But they, you know, from what you eat in the morning can impact on how your microbiome feels that night, kind of thing, is what also some research is saying. So we have an incredible ability to influence the microbiome, and the research is enormous about the far-reaching effects of what our microbiome does for us. We are far more bacteria than we are even our own cells in the body. And so we have to kind of really make friends with this microbiome and really nurture it. It's almost like I often refer to it with my clients a little bit like treat it like your pet, and you have to look after it and, you know, protect it every day and feed it in the right way. And it will look after you in a very powerful way. You're absolutely right about the serotonin. A happy gut has an incredible impact on the brain, the emotions, and keeping you in a nice place. Yeah. So it's there's a lot of there's a massive impact that you can play just by eating the foods that are right for you.
What I'm also interested in is, I mean, all this gets set up when we're little. So supposedly when we get breastfed, we take all these antibodies, and that helps also set up the gut biome. Yeah. And when we don't get breastfed anymore, there's a webinar that I still have to listen to from the scientist, which talks about how that actually is related to breast milk and how important it is for us to actually be breastfed, which we don't do anymore. We have powdered milk instead.
I think that this is coming back. I think they went through a particularly bad time of discouraging breastfeeding. But so when a baby is born, there is a very beautiful sort of journey that the gut microbiome takes from the baby, first of all, coming through the birth canal. That's where it picks up from the mum, the first seeds, so to speak, of a healthy microbiome. So getting a healthy mum in that respect is one of the key things that also has to happen. But then the breastfeeding comes in, and it takes everything to the next level. And it's a journey. I actually do see that it's that real journey of the microbiome evolves. And there's a lot of research in the microbiome over the years. So they've taken groups of children and tested their microbiome on regular occasions and seen how different species have sort of started off being in abundance, and then other species come in and take over, kind of thing. Mm-hmm. What this research is really allowing us is that whole potential ability, when somebody has got a disturbed microbiome, that you can kind of take it back and restart it again, kind of thing. Well, so there's a lot of exciting work in changing this. And actually, I think I quite like to take a very positive route for a lot of people, because otherwise we could have this whole doom and gloom. Oh my, I had so much antibiotics when I was a kid and I wasn't breastfed. Oh, I've got no hope. But actually, this is the wonderful thing about the research. When we really know the journey of the microbiome, potentially you can kind of recreate that. Yeah. And it's kind of important to not just see all it is taking a quick probiotic from the chemist. Yeah. And that's all you have to do. Or you can take as many antibiotics as you kind of are prescribed, but just take a probiotic after. That's far too simplistic, and it's not going to really benefit you in the long run. No.
But it is about taking a holistic approach. It is about eating foods that are close to nature. Yeah. It is about making sure that, the stomach fillers are the occasional ones and not the regular ones.
Yeah. What I would say is that your food you eat has the biggest impact on your microbiome of everything you could possibly do. Yeah. So even if you are having to take antibiotics for whatever reason, because they are lifesavers at the end of the day, I am not anti-pharmaceutical. You have to be holistic in the whole thing, in my opinion. We need to take the learnings from each sector and make the best for that individual sat in front of us. Yeah. And but the food you eat has the biggest impact day to day than anything else you can do. And you can change your whole microbiome by properly changing your diet for the better to include all those whole foods, fresh vegetables, the right proteins for you, the right fiber, soluble fiber, the fruits. If you just stick to that and stay away from as much processed chemical, additive included stuff, that's where you'll get the rewards.
So it's as Hippocrates used to say, let food be thy medicine, right?
Totally, yeah, totally.
So what about sugar and alcohol then? I mean, it used to be fat was the baddie, and then we discovered that fats are really essential to our brain health because we need fat to actually think, which may explain why the last few decades haven't been that great for us. We may have done some really not so useful thinking in some areas. So now we're getting on the sugar and the alcohol and all of that. What's the problem with that?
It is the sheer amount of sugar and the unnecessary sugar and the impact that it really has on our metabolism as well. It's it changes how the body stores and processes fats and glucose. It's just used far too much to make foods again taste, give us that we are in evolutionary driven to find the sugar. We never had the amount of sugar ever. It was always fruits and berries, and it was a very seasonal thing that we used to be able to get, and honey was the other thing that we would also hunt out from the bees, in an evolutionary term. So we never had such a sweet diet ever, as opposed to what we have now.
And it's never been so available. I mean, you can now basically go out and 24/7, there will be a place that serves you or sells you something that involves sugar. I mean, I remember we would go shopping once a week when I grew up, and we would get something that was something sweet, and there was a container, it was at the top of the cabinet. And every now and then, not every day, just every now and then, my mother would get it down and we were allowed to pick one little lolly. And that was it.
Yeah, I think that's it's coming. You brought in my mind another point probably that I make is that it's not yet, the sugar is a real driver for a lot of people. We get a sweet tooth and we just want to eat more sugar. Okay. I used to have a terrible sweet tooth as a child. I would actually say, my background comes from having terrible food choices myself, and then realizing that food was how I was going to get well myself. And I used to take 4 teaspoons of sugar in my tea.
Wow. Okay.
And when I think to that now, I can't even bear the tiniest little bit anymore. It just tastes so thick and so.
And how many cups of tea did you drink a day? That's the next question.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and this is where you come from, where when you have a good understanding of what people do and why they do it, you can really potentially help them in a massive way. But one of the things I do feel about our society as well is that we have an intolerance to hunger as well, which we and I mean this in the sense that we live in the most fortunate part of the world, or a fortunate part of the world, where we typically, most of us don't have to worry about actually being hungry for more than a few hours. Yeah, we don't ever need to be hungry because we can quickly grab a quick snack. We can go to the kitchen and grab a packet of chips or a biscuit. We can stop off at the petrol station, grab a lolly or a chocolate bar. We can send out for Uber at 3 o'clock in the morning, Uber Eats, and get some food brought to our front door. Whatever we want.
So this whole thing about hangry, that's actually not something that we are. That's something that has been cooked up.
That's what your metabolism has created for you. When you have a disturbed metabolism, that is where your blood sugar just dips way too low. And then you have that real, it's almost becomes that emergency to reboost your blood sugar back up again. But it's reactive. So if you are taking a lot of sugar, you are going to have more dips. And this is where, when you retrain your metabolism, you can totally get rid of those feelings. And that is, I come from that with an incredible personal experience with that. that I used to have terrible blood sugar issues. But, you know, working and, you know, restoring that balance back is where you can actually have your breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and then you get on with your work between, which is what I do. I don't, and that is where you are fueling your body in the right way. You're prioritizing the fuel, and you're getting everything else done in between.
Yeah. But people get really anxious when they don't have food, and
I mean, and that is that drop in glucose.
Almost.
Yeah. The brain needs glucose. That is the primary source of glucose, of fuel for the brain cells. We have to have glucose for the brain cells. When you're, you know, if there's an incredible whole cascade of steps that your body takes to protect that glucose level in the blood. The brain is the primary driver for making sure that that glucose stays in the right place. And when that glucose drips down, we need that emergency. You know, it's important for us to get, and that's why you have those very strong emotions that just drive you to do what the body essentially needs at that point in time.
Can you get used to higher sugar levels, and can you bring it up? Because I hear that there's a sugar is really addictive, and,
Yes,
and that it actually occupies the same receptors in the brain that cocaine and other drugs.
Yeah, the synapse receptors that do get fired. And I think the detrimental effects of having too much sugar are very widespread as well, because it actually kills the cells. Sugar actually slowly kills and coats everything and slowly kills everything off. So this is why you have, you know, diabetes is an incredibly horrific condition. My son, who's 17, only made a joke the other week where he was looking, I think he was having a big bowl of ice cream or something, he wanted ice cream or something, and then he just made the comment, diabetes, here I come. And it's used as obviously it's a joke. And I think this is a bit of a meme that's actually going around. And I sort of said, what do you say? And he said, it's a meme or something. And I'm like, people joke about this as in a way of sort of making it okay that they're tucking into this enormous pile of sugar and, you know, fat rich.
In German, we have a saying that is, love goes through the stomach. You know, it's like you express your love by cooking food that, you know, that the other person wants. And you always, you know, and then sweet things. I know my grandmother used to spend days in the kitchen just preparing our favorite foods. And they were generally sweet or rich in carbohydrates and, you know, all of those comfort foods that we really appreciated.
And I think there's
special.
A place for those, though. I actually love that kind of story. I adore, because I actually do think there's a lot of love that comes from preparing food beautifully. And I think this is where, as a society, we can learn a lot from the traditional, like the Italian traditional way of getting everybody around a big table and having a real social time of enjoying the meal. You know,
don't do that anymore. We now sit at the table and everybody's in front of their iPad or their phone.
Or they're not even sitting, they're not even taking that time. They're just grabbing any old sandwich out of the petrol station, you know, cooler, and just eating it in the car or something. And so, I mean, like, I think it's incredibly true that love does come through. You've got to, but it's also love for yourself too. Actually putting yourself forward and first and saying, I'm important enough. I am enough, and I am important to take this time, and I'm going to enjoy. I'm going to look at my food. I'm going to let it nourish me, and I'm going to choose the foods that will actually nourish me, not just choose the foods that some scientist in a lab has decided are going to make me taste delicious, you know, make it taste delicious, and I'm going to eat the entire packet before I can stop.
So that takes me to my next question. So we're used to eating lots and lots of different foods, and then, you know, as you said, we don't necessarily process them, and people tell us that this is what we should be eating or what we shouldn't be eating. What about food intolerances? I mean, there's the whole gluten, and then there's lactose, and you know, all of that. Is that actually a fad, or is that real?
I think, it's very real, but I actually do think there's a hell of a lot more to it than is, you know, the standard sort of you know, banded around.
Mm-hmm.
Food intolerances are a product of what's happening at that moment in time. So when somebody has got poor gut health, there's more food is going to cause irritation. I actually refer to a lot of the food intolerances as like there's usually one or two key bullies. And if you kind of imagine, like I talk about them as bullies in the playground,
Mm-hmm.
that we have a key. Unfortunately, we have so much inflammation, stress, poor nutrient levels that are all affecting gut health. So it's kind of, it's that chicken and egg situation. There's a lot of people that can grow up, you know, through, you know, in the 40s, 50s, 60s, never having an issue with any foods whatsoever. But now we get all these pesticides, we have sort of toxins, we have stress, all affecting that gut health. And it's a little bit like you no longer have that beautiful smooth surface. You've got cracks, you've got gaps that the sort of food particles are going to get through and then get into the bloodstream and cause a immune response. So it's circumstantial often how somebody can develop an intolerance to a particular food. But then what I often see, it's usually one or two key bullies that the immune system is responding to, or the body is having a problem with in some way. And that is another key point to make. The immune system is an incredibly complex system that we actually don't fully understand why it gets fired in the certain ways that it does. There's still a big, you know, why food intolerances develop or food allergies develop. Why do some people have sort of anaphylactic effects with it, whereas other people just get bad stomach cramps? It doesn't mean that one or the other. Obviously, the anaphylactic is a serious life-threatening condition, but it still doesn't mean that the stomach cramp one isn't important and shouldn't be paid attention to, because there's still damage happening and there's still that cumulative effect that can happen. But what I find that when you actually identify and you get a few key bullies, you do the proper process of healing the gut, getting everything calmed down, getting the immune system to sort of to calm down. I refer to it, or I have in my mind the picture of sort of like your body is this castle, and you have all these guards sort of on guard on the turrets. And when you've got an immune system, it's like they're all so completely hyped up and just like jumping at an ant that's walking past. And we're like, no, come on, everybody just calm down. There's no threat going on here. And when you can do that, when you can get everything back into sync, you can really sort of get everybody else to get along. So you take out that key bully, and then everyone else is like, no, let's just be friends. So food intolerances are definitely a real thing. They should definitely be acknowledged, but I also do think it's so important to actually work with somebody who can properly help you with that. Because it definitely isn't the case, in my opinion, of course, that you just take everything out that you think you might be responding to. I have had many a client who's coming to me and they're just having so few foods, which is so totally wrong. And when you actually get the healing right, you can add so much back in. You can actually get them to having a pretty normal life of maybe a key one like dairy or gluten or what, you know, the salicylates or whatever it might be, but you can actually find what really is the problem.
Yeah. I know people who can basically eat 3 foods and that's it. Yes. And it's really stressful emotionally to be around people like that, because, you know, yeah. You know, I know that there's certain, you can't go to restaurants together, you can't cook foods together, you can't sit together, because it's always, the focus is always on food and how difficult it is and how challenging, because the whole conversation revolves around it.
And it's the social aspect. You know, I am a massive fan of this holistic approach, as in we have to have, we're social creatures, human beings, no matter, you know, and it's that interaction while we're nourishing ourselves, while we're sort of hearing stories, and you know, that is so powerful and so important. And when your food becomes too overwhelming, you're losing too much, in my opinion. You've got to, and this is where I take a very pragmatic view as well with my clients. And we never look for perfection, ever. We always have to find the ways to do the right thing for us, and also have a lot of fun at the same time as well.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on that. We don't share stories over food anymore, but we eat. So, and again, we have this plethora of foods available 24/7. So we can eat emotionally. So we can really stuff a hole inside ourselves when we feel sad, when we feel lonely, when we feel stressed. And people do that.
Mm-hmm.
And I know it's really easy to stand in front of a fridge and medicate. Instead of eating because we're hungry, it's just putting food down. I mean, how does our emotional state impact on how we process food? Is there connection? Because, you know, like, as you said, the microbiome actually responds to what we eat within a short period of time. And when we have emotions in a certain way, does that actually then change how we process food?
I would say the primary thing it probably does is affect the entire digestive system, and actually how the digestion is a genuine process that starts even from the minute you think about think about food or think about you're hungry. That is actually the first sort of physiological change that's going to start the whole digestion process and cascade of processes. And stress stress plays a massive role on how those processes are even going to be kick-started for the first thing. Stress is one of our primary, the flight or fight response is our primary stress response. And that digestion doesn't need to happen for that. So this is a key point that I do work with. When somebody is under stress, or they're anxious about something, or they are, their mind is a million miles away from what they're actually eating, it's kind of like the body says, well, we need to concentrate on that. We need to pump all that blood to the muscles so that we can run away. We need to keep the mind alert. We don't need to digest our food right now. Yeah. We'll just take resources away from that part, and then everything else will be fine. But we're still putting food in. Yeah. So the whole process is digestion is a key thing that is affected by stress. And it's not, a lot of people feel that, a lot of heaviness in the stomach, or that the food isn't going, the bloating, the constipation. It's all because everything is kind of blocked. It's like the process isn't happening. And so emotions play a big role in making sure that happens, but we can't always take away the stress. It's about managing that part, but then also managing your digestions and so that we can actually get the flow happening as well too. Then you can absorb your nutrients. It's such a chicken and an egg situation for me, because what started it? Was it the stress, the emotions, the anxiety that's led to the poor digestion, that then leads to not being able to absorb the nutrients, to low nutrient status, so you don't have the right neurotransmitters to actually calm yourself down, so you get more anxious, so you get more, and then you go on this whole cascade.
Yes.
And this is where, what I really work with clients is to properly kind of stop that cycle. Let's just get this digestion sorted. Let's get those nutrients up. Let's get you feeling those calming neurotransmitters. And then you can have a chance as well to deal with your other emotions and your stress outside or away from the kitchen and the table, etc.
But you can say to somebody, and I say that, I mean, obviously I'm not a nutritionist, but I work with people who are really stressed out. And I say to them, you're not going to digest your food properly, and it's going to be even worse when you sit in front of your computer while you're eating and you're answering an email that you're really stressed out about. How about you just take 10 minutes? I don't have 10 minutes. And I go, but those are the 10 minutes that are really going to make a difference to the rest of your day, to the rest of your week, to the rest of the year, to the rest of your life, because you're teaching your body that your well-being is not important. And, and if you're not digesting your food, you're going to become, I talk to people about simple things like drinking water. And people go, you know, but that has nothing to do with how I feel. And I go, yes, a lot, because you can't detox, you can't process your food, you can't do anything.
Dehydration has a massive impact on even that whole cell, you know, your body being able to do all of the body processes. Dehydration is a very big point. But yeah, I think taking that time, this is one of the, you know, the biggest learnings that I try to give to my clients is when you put your list of priorities in the right order, you actually get such a better result for your passions in life. Like my passion is obviously food and nourishing, nourishing and helping people do that. But if your passion is to build your business, or to look after your kids better, or to climb Mount Kilimanjaro, whatever that passion is, if all you're focusing is on, well, I've just got to, you know, work harder in the office, I've just got to make that more phone calls, it's not going to work. But actually, if you put the food, if you put your nutrition in the right place, and I'm not saying it has to be at the top, I'm saying it has to be close to the top, you know, like 1, 2, or 3 really, because that then allows everything else to trickle down and actually happen better.
Yeah,
that's the key thing. Yeah.
So emotional intelligence and nutrition are they really go hand in hand, because if you know how you're feeling when you're putting something in your body, you're focusing on what you're eating. So this is my take, and then I really want to hear yours. So if I know what I'm putting into my body, and I know what I'm feeling while I'm eating it, and I stop when I feel satisfied, which is often much earlier than we think it is, because we eat past the point of being full, because we're doing other things while we're eating. And that's not the social eating. That's I'm writing an email, I'm doing this, I'm doing that, which stresses me out. So I'm not in touch with how my body feels at all. And then I just expect that my body is going to stay healthy and I'm going to be emotionally really productive. And that's unfortunately not what happens. We get really cranky when we don't really take care of ourselves, when we don't have enough water, when we don't get the right nutrients. And I mean, I know personally, you know, when I don't take care of my nutrition, I don't sleep particularly well. And I know that my mind isn't really as clear as it can be. And I get irritated much faster. So that's my take.
I think that also just, it's exactly how I see things. And I think, but there are so many people that haven't felt good for so long. They've eaten a lot of this kind of food for so long that they actually don't even fully appreciate the power of eating good food actually can have on their emotions. And you know, you can go for a long period of time, potentially some people can anyway, of, you know, surviving on a low nutrient level, but you're not thriving on it. So we talk about a lot of people, you know, people who've only recently had a client who's had headaches pretty much every day of his life for the last 35 years, a dull ache in the back of his head. Now that is something that he just thinks is him. You know, he's had all the tests under the sun and he's just, well, that's just me, I've just got to put up with it. But we get his nutrition right and he comes back, haven't had a headache all week. And those are the types of things that just really make me love my job, because it's just, we can change things for people, and people can feel so much better when they do properly address things, put it as a priority, pay attention to what they're eating, when they're eating, how they're eating, but also recognize that it's not just going to be do what everyone else does. That's probably the key thing for me too. Personalizing it to that client, making it work for them. And I mean, I have been said so many times, people say to me, oh, I know what I should be doing. And I'm like, I don't even know what you should be doing yet. How the hell do you know what you should be doing when you've never looked at this before? I mean, I haven't fully assessed everything. I need to look at all the clues, and then we will come up with a plan. We will see how it goes, and then we will tweak it. And so, you know, they may have read one magazine article that says they should have, you know, 2 snacks a day and 3 meals and X amount of water or whatever, but it's not personalized to them.
No. But again, we do a 10-question test on the internet, and then they send us a personalized diet plan. I did that the other day just to find out what it was. And I looked at it and went, if this is the plan, I wouldn't last for 2 days, because it's so generic, and it has absolutely nothing to do with nutrition. I was just so curious what they would send me. And I was like, oh, really? So, again, there are all these waves, it's like, I mean, there's the celery juice, and and there's all sorts of things that you should be doing, and they have nothing to do with what's important for us and for the life that we live, the conditions that we have, the environment that we live in. I mean, like, the food that I get here in Queensland will be very different, for example, from the food that I would be getting if I were living in the US at the moment, because it's a totally different season. But we don't eat with the seasons anymore either. So I mean, look, we can talk about this for hours. I mean, it's just food and emotions and how we process and how we're building the building blocks for the rest of our lives with every meal that we ingest, and the relationships that we have with other people.
It's the impact on relationships that's probably another key passion of mine as well.
Yes.
Because when you are actually in a good place, you actually can talk to your partner, you can talk to your kids, you can relate, you can be in such a better place. And I love that aspect. I'm quite an old romantic at heart. I definitely am not in any way any kind of couples counselor or any kind of counselor. I'm a nutritional therapist. But the stories when people say, oh yeah, my husband and I are now going away for a weekend together, and like they haven't taken the time to do that for, I don't know, 6 years or something, and then suddenly they're just connecting again, because then you're no longer coming home from work falling asleep on the sofa and just being grumpy and irritable with each other.
Yes,
you're actually in a good place that you can talk. And I think that's just that kind of stuff I never get tired of hearing.
And you talk about good stuff while you're eating food. You don't digest the day by going, oh, and this went wrong, and that went wrong, and this was terrible, which is
what your kids are saying too. Yeah, if you all sit down, if you actually prioritize sitting down as a family where you can actually hear what everyone's has gone through that day, or the good stuff, as the good stuff as well as the bad stuff. But you can connect, and you can nourish yourselves at the same time, so that you can connect even better. It's that whole that real it has such a big knock-on effect. I remember when I was training, actually, and there was very early on, there was a lecturer who stood up in front of the whole, like the first year of nutritional therapy. We're all sat there, and he goes, right, so you all think that you're doing a non-invasive therapy here. You're helping people with their nutrition. You're not touching them. You're not doing anything to them, particularly non-invasive. I was like, yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah. And he goes, you're completely wrong. You are probably doing the most invasive therapy there is, because you are potentially affecting every aspect of their lives. You are changing how they can relate to other people, how they see themselves, how they're feeling, what's going to happen in their work day, what's going to happen in their home life, what's going to happen when they socialize with friends and family, etc. You are going to be potentially doing that.
Absolutely.
And you're like, yeah. And so this is where I focus this on doing all of this for the incredible positives of it, the change that people can have, the change in their future, their hope for the future. A lot of the time we know we need to stay in the present. There's a lot of that, you just take one step at a time, what you're doing right now, but also you being able to look forward to your future and think, okay, I'm actually going to have a healthy older age. I'm going to feel okay when I'm going through the menopause. I'm going to everything's just going to fall into place. I'm not going to spend my retirement years going from one doctor's waiting room to the other. just taking another prescription and slowly waiting for the next prescription to come in.
That then deals with the side effects of the prescription that I've been taking.
That I love.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a whole new can of worms we can know.
Absolutely. Yes.
But like I said, I kind of wish that our health system was where we could take the great stuff from all of it. If we could really help people get the right foods, but when we could actually target the right medication for that condition, we're not just trying to mask a symptom, you know. Having a regular headaches, yes, you won't have a brain tumor. Excellent. We don't want that. But that doesn't mean you've got a deficiency in paracetamol. We actually need to find out why that headache is happening, not just take endless painkillers.
Yes. And again, or people who are, you know, who have, I mean, mental illness is on the rise. You know, it's like, I'm waiting for the doctor to say, so what do you eat on a regular basis before they prescribe the pill?
This is the tragedy in many ways, because, you know, back in 2017, there was a big paper was published that was signed by about 50 different psychiatrists, all saying that nutrition is vitally important for mental health. And yet we still don't have that ever being talked about.
No.
But to me, unless you talk about that, and it's kind of like, what's my analogy I use is also we all recognize that plants in the garden need to be in the right spot in the garden. They need to thrive. Different plants need different levels of sunlight, different levels of water, different levels of the right foods or the right soil to thrive. If you put a plant in the wrong place and don't give it the right things it needs, do you start blaming that plant and telling it's wrong and it's got to think about why it's not doing right and get annoyed with that plant? Or do you actually think, okay, how am I going to make this thrive and move it to the right place? And that's in essence what we've got to allow people the opportunity to thrive. Yes. And then we work on the other emotional stuff.
But we also need to support people in being responsible and take responsibility for their own health. You know, it's like, I think we're getting to the place now where we tell people, again, there's a lot of social pressure. I mean, I have gone to parties and said, I don't drink, you know, and I don't eat this and I do this. And people say, well, you're really antisocial if you don't do that. But we also, you know, like there's so many expectations, and people just get to this place where they go, okay, I'll just fit in. I'll just do whatever everybody else does.
I think when you do, when you do actually understand why you're doing stuff, when you're working with somebody that can actually really point out what's important. I mean, I work in private practice and I work with people that want to change, that want to see me, that want to make a difference. And that's massive, and that's so important. But I think as a society, we need to really start looking at what is in our supermarkets, what is in just readily available, and start seeing that a lot of time it's not always that individual's fault. It's kind of like you can't just, you know, tread on somebody effectively without and expect them to pick themselves up. A lot of people are reacting to their situation. So it's about kind of really making fresh foods more readily available to, you know, even the government paying more of a subsidy to reduce the costs of fresh food. I think it's a question for society to start actually saying there's a question that we need to answer and have a debate about is, are we really going to start to recognize what is food and what is a food stuff or a stomach filler? I even think getting the vocabulary more, you know, changed is a vital first step. Yeah. And then we talk about, you know, is there a place for making fresh foods more readily available and cheaper?
Emotional intelligence and leadership, that's my thing. And I'm always, so like on one hand, it's important to me that people understand that emotions impact on what we put into our bodies. And then again, as you said, the chicken or the egg question, and then what we put into our bodies impacts on our emotions. And that if we want to be in a really great self-leadership space, we need to be aware of what we're feeling. We need to be aware of what we put into our bodies. And I use the word need. I don't like the word need in that sense of you need to do something, but it's really important because we're fulfilling some really, really elemental needs that are supporting a healthy, happy, and successful life. And we are just, again, we're just so good at outsourcing responsibility. We're putting stuff into our body that we know we shouldn't eat, but we do because everybody else is doing it. And when we get hangry or cranky or anything, then it's because something has been done to us. Whereas I know what I can put into my body. I can make some healthy choices around that so I can manage my emotions. And that's for leadership. I think that's really, really important. Because if I, as a leader, I impact on people around me, so I have a responsibility to myself and how I present myself by managing myself and by self-caring. So that's my aspect to it. And I love that you work with couples, because that's the other aspect, when you create that foundation for, being together, raising families and working, because that's where a lot of stuff comes from. That's where you get the spread, when parents connect with their children while they eat, when they talk about things and don't just put an iPad into their child's hands and just saying, here you go, while they sit and eat in front of their phone. And just, again, I'm just summarizing something that just a tiny little aspect of everything that I've heard you say, and that I think we both agree on, and how important it is that we actually start shifting our view on nutrition and food stuff.
Definitely. Yeah, no. And I think it's a lot of, I think leaving, just a final point, there's always so much hope for people. That's the thing. We can really change how people feel. You can really change your futures. You can change, you can shift the balance. It's sort of a Hunger Games quote is, may the odds be forever in your favor. And that's what you do. You basically shift it to be in your favor. You are awake, you are alert, you're able to concentrate. Your body is not aches and pains. You are not having to go and have a rest in the afternoon. All of those things shift the odds in your favor so that you can achieve your passions, achieve what you want to achieve, whatever that might be, or lead better, as you talk about with leadership. Yeah.
Well, that's another topic for another time, because I think a lot of people love being numb and medicated, because if we start thinking about what's actually
that's a whole can of worms you're opening up again.
Go there. But it's important. It's about, again, I mean, we've got some really active people in the world at the moment who are speaking up for things, and those are the awake people. And generally, when you look at them, their diet actually speaks for who they are. And we've got some examples of leaders who, put things into their body where I go, well, you might benefit from a healthier diet, but that's just me.
Yeah. So there's all sorts of, I think it's just the science is backing up, but as soon as, like you have said yourself, and I can totally attest to, as soon as you actually start to eat what's right for you, you don't actually particularly want to go back to feeling how you used to feel, or how the wrong stuff makes you feel. And it's not even a case of your emotions then are driving you in the more positive way, because I look at certain foodstuffs and I just think, I haven't got time to feel like that's going to make me feel. I just, no. And it might be a bit of a nice mouthfeel for 30 seconds in my mouth, but I haven't got time now. No way. I'm not even interested. So yeah.
And I want a good night's sleep, and I want to get along with the people I'm around.
Yeah, and when you know how you're going to feel, even if it's not in the next half an hour, in the next day or week, that's what drives people to making better choices for themselves. Yeah.
Well, that's a good way to finish. So this is, it's about making better choices. So hopefully what we've talked about will help people to actually look at what they put into their mouth and into their stomach, and, you know, make some more conscious choices about that, knowing how it impacts on them and on the people around them. Thank you for this. This was a great conversation. And I know we could talk for at least another 2 hours, because I think we've just scratched the surface.
Yeah, no,
Thank
it's
you
been
so
lovely
much,
talking
Cherry.
to you, Angela.
And, you know, anybody who wants to get in touch with Cherry, the details are at the bottom of the interview. And yes, and find out about her personalized approach for metabolic balancing, which is a really unique way of looking at how nutrients impact on us, and find the perfect diet. And it's not a diet, it's an approach to food. And as you said, what
The lifestyle. Well,
exactly, it's a lifestyle. It's not about perfection. So thank you very much. And yeah, I hope I'll see you again soon.